Well, thank you for turning out in droves for this presentation. I'm so excited to see so many people here. Dr. Don Gragg is here, and he's going to talk to us about cognitive aging. And he'll have a microphone to better let you hear. So thank you for coming out, and I'll turn you over to Dr. Gragg.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh, yeah.
Am I too loud?
You're on.
You're on.
If you can't read the cartoon, that it says, yesterday I knew the answer to Final Jeopardy and all three contestants got it wrong. And I thought, cool, my mind is sharp as a tack. Then this morning I sprayed some deodorant, only it wasn't deodorant, it was Super Bowl hairspray. And I thought, rats, my mind is a bowl of soggy Fruit Loops. Now we could make up cartoons like this, probably 100 of them every day, with our own personal experiences. And I am going to sort of talk about that indirectly this afternoon. Last year, the National Academy of Sciences Institute of Medicine, which has gotten promoted since the report came out, is now the National Academy of Medicine. They stepped up to their boss's name. Published a comprehensive report reviewing all the literature that was available on the concept of cognitive aging. And what I'm going to do this afternoon is try to condense that 350 pages down to about 45 minutes of a few points that I think are relevant for all of us, and hopefully we will all remember them. And incidentally, just to help with that, there are handouts that you can pick up afterward that have everything on it that you need to know. And if you'd like to go somewhere else, you can leave now and pick up the handout. The first paragraph of the report I thought was worthy of including in toto. Of the abilities people hope will remain intact as they get older, perhaps the most treasured is to stay sharp, to think clearly, remember accurately, and make decisions with careful thought. Yet the brain ages. Every part of us ages, it's not just the brain. But we're here today to talk about cognitive aging, and to just expand a bit on the cognitive. What is cognition? Well, we tend to think of it, cognition, as what the brain does, the thinking part of what the brain does. And the dividers, the scholars divided into these functions: attention, and I tend to think of attention as what I'm lacking when I go into the den to get something off my desk and think, oh, it's time to take a pill, and I don't get the thing off my desk. Or as the parishioner said to the priest who came to visit him shortly after he was diagnosed with cancer, and the priest asked him, John, do you give any thought to the hereafter? And he said, oh, several times a day. I go into the other room and I say, what am I hereafter? That's attention. We all know what thinking, understanding, learning, remembering, problem solving, and decision making is about, but all of those things are cognition. And with aging, all of those things, plus more, are involved. A few words about defining and describing cognitive aging. The report describes it as a process of gradual yet highly variable changes in cognitive functions that occur as we age. And the important things to remember is it's gradual, and it doesn't say in old age, it says as we age, and it starts right around the time we're born. And we'll talk about some of the functions that get better instead of just the ones that get worse. And it's not dementia. That's the first thing I want you to remember. Cognitive aging is an expected, normal, if you like, effect of time passing and our brain's function. It does not mean that we're going to develop dementia. It's lifelong, as I said, and variable. And as I implied, there's some things that get better as we get older. Of course, there are a few others too. I'd like to read for you from an article that was in the Union Tribune a few months ago. It's about a professor of theoretical physics from Princeton. He's now an emeritus professor, but he's still involved. He's only 92 years old, and he teaches a seminar at UCSD every winter. He's smart enough to leave New Jersey and come to San Diego for the winter. He was interviewed by a reporter for the UT and asked the question, how do you feel about aging? And I'll read his answer. I think theoretical physicists sort of have a midlife crisis, an extreme case of it. You lose the ability to do physics quickly. The really great theoretical physicists are mostly in their 20s and 30s. So when you arrive at 40, there's a midlife crisis. You don't compete anymore with the brilliant young people. The question is, what do you do with the second part of your life? For many people, it's quite simple. You go into administration. Kim, no. Where you can do a lot of useful things. Or you become a teacher, if you have a gift for that. I decided that my gift was to be a writer. In the second half of my life, science has been a hobby. My real job is writing. Many writers continue to be good into their 70s or 80s. He's 92. I think I'm losing the ability to write to some extent. I don't think I'll write any more books. I just don't have the endurance. My attention span is getting shorter. I tend to write reviews of other people's books. Now here's a man who, shortly, I'm going to discuss the concept of cognitive reserve. You can guess what it means. It is, we got more than we need. At least we start out with more than we need. This guy obviously started out with lots of cognitive reserve. He's recognized that he's lost some skills as he's aged, and he's adapted. At 92, he's still a very functional academic. Now, I can't say that I would be able to carry out at 82 anything near like what he does. But even a man of this brilliance recognizes he has to adjust with age. Some of the high points of what changes with age, the good part is that we tend to improve in the categories of wisdom, knowledge, and judgment. And I'll comment on that in a minute. Unfortunately, our attention, memory, and processing speed, the speed with which we can analyze the situation and make decisions, decreases. So we don't move quite as quickly mentally as we used to. It doesn't mean we can't still do it, we just don't do it quite as quickly. I said that cognitive aging isn't dementia. And the current state of the art, which is pretty primitive, it divides this process of cognitive aging to dementia into 3 lumps. Now, clinically, and by clinically I mean what we can see when we talk to somebody or even give them some simple kinds of testing, is it's all a continuous thing. We can't say, aha, there's a definitive solid line between cognitive aging and mild cognitive impairment and dementia. You do a test And it goes clearly as one of those, that's not the way it is. It's a continuous spectrum, and we try to arbitrarily divide it into categories. We say that cognitive aging is really don't worry about it too much. There are things that we can do to make it worse, there are things that we can do to make it better, but we can live with it, we can live a normal life. Now, if we get to where we can't really fully live a normal life, we need some help with things, we've got mild cognitive impairment, which is defined as a noticeable and measurable decline in mental abilities, but does not significantly impact daily functioning. Okay, now what's the definition of daily functioning? And what's the definition of measurable decline? It's all very fuzzy in my mind, and the book did nothing to clarify it, other than different people draw the line different places. But we use these three categories. And we're going to really talk about the first category, but it's going to flow into the second, and to some degree, slightly into dementia. I'm not really talking about dementia today. I'm talking about cognitive aging, and I will refer to the others in a few, just for distinction's sake. Now I can put you to sleep. But I'm not going to spend long on the anatomy and physiology involved. But I think it's important for us to understand that within our brain, there's something like 100 billion neurons. And each of these neurons has from 1,000 to 10,000 synapses, or that is, connections, communications to another neuron. Can you conceive of the complexity of the connections and interactions? It almost makes the computer sound simple. And in actuality, compared to this, a computer is simple. But I don't understand a computer, and I sure don't understand this. But the thing I'd like you to recognize is that A, the brain is largely made up of these many, many cells which communicate with a bunch of other cells, and the communication link is the synapse. And this is the synapse down here, and it works by having a chemical form on one side of the space and diffuse through a microscopic space to the next cell. So the connection is chemical. It's a chemical process that makes that link. Now, a few general facts about the brain. Our brains tend to diminish in volume. I won't use the S word for shrink, but our brains get smaller with age. And there are things we can do about that. And there's the brain getting smaller is related, must be related to the diminishing function. But we can't make a one-to-one connection between the two. But on average, the brain volume decreases about 5% per decade after age 40, or another source referred to it as 15% decrease in size by age 75. Now I know there are things you can do to reduce that. I was very pleased a few months ago. I had an MRI, and I was given a report, and in the report it said that my brain had not shrunk as much as could be expected by my age. And that made me very happy. But I attribute that, my first plug for exercise, my first of many plugs for exercise, it was that I ran marathons, I climbed mountains, I continued to be very physically active every day. What that says is I'm pumping lots of blood, and a percentage of the blood I pump goes to my brain. And if I'm pumping twice as much blood as I would be sitting and watching TV, my brain is probably getting twice as much blood. And there's reason to think that may be part of the reason it's not shrinking so much. I don't know why the function keeps going down. No, in Alzheimer's disease, which you've all heard lots about, you've all heard about the plaques and the tangles and the destruction of cells, and there are other forms of dementia where brain cells are killed either by strokes or other processes. But in cognitive aging, there does not appear to be a loss of cells. It seems to be that the cell volume decreases, and one of the things that the theoreticians postulate is that the mechanism for conducting information from one cell to the next, that synapse, where a chemical is formed in one cell, diffuses across that microscopic space into the next cell and activates it, that function may be where the cognitive aging is focused. That either the chemical doesn't form as well, actually the chemical is taken back up, pulled back up to be used again. Maybe that process isn't working right, but it's within that spot rather than in the body of the cell that the theoreticians say may be the focus for cognitive aging. Now, why are we talking about that? I don't know, because it doesn't have anything to do with what we're going to say makes it better or worse, but just to deal with curiosity. At least my curiosity is taken care of. I'm going to let you worry about yours. I mentioned cognitive reserve before. You know, we have 2 kidneys, don't need 1. We've got many times the volume of liver that we need to do everything our liver needs to do. We tend to have spares in our body. We're built that way. And our brains are fortunately built that way too, so that we can lose a lot of the function, and we've got spares to come in and keep us working normally. It's when we start running out of spares that we start having complaints and trouble remembering or making decisions as quickly as we'd like. So that how much reserve we have. Now this Princeton professor had a lot of reserve. I mean, he hasn't come near using up his reserve yet. Maybe in some categories, but certainly not most. So that how much cognitive reserve we have to start with is going to be a factor in how much symptoms or complaints we have in the aging process. And neuroplasticity is another characteristic which we keep throughout life, and that is if one circuit goes bad in the brain knows how to bypass it in the vernacular. It's a matter of rewiring, of relearning, and we all know people who've had strokes, and initially they're totally paralyzed, and after months of rehab and effort, they're walking and talking again, almost as though nothing had happened, because their brain is learning to work around the area of damage. And we keep that process, and that without that, we probably wouldn't be here, because we wouldn't remember how to get here, or that it was going on. We bypass the deficits so that we can keep functioning as well as possible. Now I'm going to show you a few charts to sort of give you an idea of what research studies have shown. This is the graph from a study in which several thousand people were given 2 cognitive tests. One was memory, sort of like the 5 words that we're asked to remember in the little test that some of us do every year. And then 5 minutes later we have to remember all 5 words of that category of testing. And the other is what's called executive functioning, which is a matter of analyzing and decision making. So there are 2 different kinds of functions. And they took the score of each of these people for their age group and score it in a Z-score basis. And all these are in Z-scores. The simple thing is, a 0 Z-score is the average or median for the entire group. And then you automatically call that a 0, and one standard deviation above that is +1, and one standard deviation below that -1. So it's all standardized back to how that whole group performed. What we see is, with age from 30 to 85, it gradually goes down. Big surprise. For both functions, not quite identically. This is another similar, only here they did a whole bunch of different tests and plotted each of them. And the reason I picked this one is I thought it was interesting. This shows a break at between 50 and 70, mostly between 50 and 60, but for one category, it's between 60 and 70. The slope changes. The decrease in function accelerates. Again, big surprise. We've all experienced this, unless we're blind and in denial. But that's the nature of, this is normal. This isn't showing the way to dementia. This is normal aging process. This is the last graph. And this one, they took nearly 1,400 adults between 71 and 89 and did a single comprehensive test, sort of like the slums or the mini mental state, the combination of clock face and words to remember, story to analyze. And they studied them, and they studied them again for a period, yearly for 5 years. At the end of they were all functioning, quote, normally for themselves. They were considered normally functioning at the beginning of this time. And so we're looking at what happens over a 5-year period when they started normal. And at the end of that time, they found that roughly 2/3 of them were still functioning without impairment. And about 1/3 had developed either mild cognitive impairment or dementia. They went back then, and those who had dementia, they looked at what their scores were, and this was their scores. What's important is those who didn't develop either mild cognitive impairment or dementia stayed the same. Now, saying the same probably is unfair because, hey, they even got better the first couple of years. That's called practice effect. When you give the same test over and over again, you learn how to do it and you get better at it. And it's a known factor in this kind of testing. So that they lost their practice effect was all they lost in that 5-year period for this group. But the main reason I picked it was one that shows, okay, here we are, 60 people, 70 people, who are all functioning well enough to get here today. And 2/3 of us, by this analysis, would be doing just as well 5 years from now as we are today. 1/3 of us may not be doing as well. 10% of us may not be here, but wasn't meant to be funny, I'm sorry. This is the graph I really like. This is a graph by age of the frequency of moving traffic violations and driving accidents. It's per million miles driven, so it corrects for how much you drive. And the red bars are the blue bars are moving traffic violations. And we can see that they go down, get less and less by age, right up until over age 80. Now, what is it that causes most moving traffic violations? My impression is judgment is the big factor. There's a little bit of knowing the rules and knowing what's right and wrong, but most of it is bad judgment in how fast you drive or what you think you can get away with. And you can see that the teenagers are high, and it gets better as we get more mature. That's one of the things, judgment is one of the things that improves with age, as well as knowledge. The accident frequency is a mixture of functions. There is judgment and knowledge and experience in operating a car, but experience you'll learn within a year or two, all you really need. But there's response time, how fast you can correct the situation, how likely you are to make up in calculating relative speeds or distances. Those are things that get worse with age, so that what we have here is a combination of it decreases as judgment improves, and then it gets worse again, going back up as we lose response times and some of the quick response sorts of things. So these demonstrate in a real practical way some of the things that we get better with age and some of the things that don't. This table looks terrible. This is a list of all of those things that impact cognitive aging. And I want to focus on a few of them and only mention some others. Number one, the first column are lifestyle things that reflect what we have been doing all of our lives up until today. Because this is the past we're talking about principally. And the second column is medically related things, and the third column are some things that you might be able to do to make things better. And one of the things you can do is alter the factors in the first two columns. I mentioned physical activity already, and it is the factor that has been shown most clearly by many research studies to influence the rate of cognitive aging. The one analysis of 21 different studies looking at how physically active people have been throughout their life and their cognitive decline showed that there was a 35% less risk of cognitive decline in those who were physically active than in those who were not. Looking at it prospectively, and okay, we can't change how physically active we were for the past 50 years, but we can talk about how physically active we are for the next 5 or 10 years. And in that, looking at groups, putting them in a physical activity group, a group that was physically active, another one who wasn't, they showed less than 35% effect, but still a very significant improvement. An improvement meaning less decline, maybe some improvement, but usually you're talking about less decline rather than improvement in things like memory and attention. Also, they have found that increased physical activity can in fact increase the brain volume. I mean, in specific regions have been studied, but as I was saying, if you pump more blood up there, you can get the tissues healthier and functioning better. How much exercise? What do you need for this? Well, the CDC recommendation for older adults, which seems to be quite widely accepted as a minimum standard. 3 things for you to remember from this slide is at least and brisk walking, and it's not just or. At least 2.5 hours a week of moderate to intense aerobic activity. And they describe this as brisk walking. And how fast is brisk? It's fast enough that you start breathing harder than you would normally breathe. The standard definition of cardio exercise, or such as this, is you should be able to carry on a conversation, but you're breathing hard enough that you sort of puff as you're carrying on the conversation. And it's just strolling doesn't really count because you're not significantly boosting up that blood flow that you need for the good effects. Also, it's been shown that strength or weight training, using dumbbells or doing exercises that in fact strengthen muscles, has a beneficial effect. The mechanism for that isn't as clear. My hunch is that really what you're doing is you're getting brief periods of more intense exercise and getting the same increased blood flow effects. But there are other things besides blood flow that are involved. That you get fairly complex changes in a number of chemical functions. The immune system is boosted by vigorous exercise, and that may play a role in the retaining the cognitive functions. But it has been shown that both the endurance exercise and the strength training have an influence. So remember, at least and brisk and it's not one or the other. Now let me see if I can get this grade. Okay, we've talked about physical activity, education and intellectual engagement. Oh, I give up. I hate touchpads. And there was room and I didn't have my mouse. Education and intellectual engagement. People who, at higher educational levels, have less cognitive decline. Social isolation, not being around other people, not interacting, becoming a social couch potato, so to speak, is another element you lose. If you're not using your brain, you're going to lose it. It's just like the muscle. You need both social and educational activities. Diet, there is connection with arteriosclerosis and heart disease, high blood pressure sorts of things, and the diet connections are probably related to that. There are vitamin deficiencies, extreme vitamin deficiencies that can cause cognitive loss, but that's not really an issue. Too much alcohol, certainly bad. A little bit probably doesn't hurt. Smoking, again, just like it interferes with heart disease and other things, it is not good. Drugs are, of course, inappropriate, can be bad. Air pollution and stress, anything that generally interferes with how well you're functioning physically is going to interfere to some degree. These are all things that the book has sections on. In the health and medical factors, the number one issue is medications. And this is the one that I think is probably least understood and is one of the top messages, one of the items on your handout, one of the things you're supposed to remember. And that is that there are some medications that are quite clearly associated with decreasing cognitive function over the years with age. One of these is antihistamines. The older antihistamines, the ones that make you sleepy and have a dry mouth, the ones that are frequently included in over-the-counter sleeping pills. In fact, it's probably safe to say that anything that you can get without a prescription that's advertised as helping you sleep is in this category. Unison is one of them. Most of the others have Benadryl or in it, and they are all in this category that has been shown to have, when taken regularly over a long period of time, have a detrimental, or to have a detrimental relationship. You can't really say cause because you haven't been able to do studies, the controlled trial studies that you need to prove that it's a cause. But the relationship is frightening, so that they are to be watched. And there's the anticholinergic group, and those are medications that make your mouth dry. The antihistamines have an anticholinergic effect, but the older antidepressants, the tricyclics we call them, that cause the dry mouth are in that category. The other category are sedatives, anything that tends to make you drowsy. It seems logical. Whether the logic is real or not, I don't know, but if you're taking something to slow the brain down, it may do that. If you're taking something to slow the brain down for 8 hours, it may last longer. And so that I'm not saying that you have to immediately stop taking all these drugs. That's not what I'm saying. You need to be cognizant that this question exists, and talk to your doctor about, or think if in the case of if you were taking a pill for sleep. Yes, John?
Don, is melatonin fitted in that program?
No. Melatonin, to my knowledge, melatonin does not have any adverse effect in this category, in this way. Thanks for asking that, because my experience, melatonin doesn't really make you sleepy either, but it helps a little. But these categories of drugs you need to be concerned about. The report indicated that the average individual over age 65 takes 14 drugs a year. And you don't take them constantly, but over the course of a year, you take or get a prescription for them for a while. And 14 different drugs a year. The American American Academy of Geriatrics publishes what they call the Beers list, named for a guy who made the list to begin with. 3 pages long of all the different medications that would appear to be relatively contraindicated in people over 65, 75. And we all take and need to take a whole bunch of different drugs. And I'm not suggesting you stop them, but it's a matter of, do I need this one, especially if it's in these categories. Ask, do I really need to keep taking it, and is the benefit better than the risk? And I can't answer that for you. Your doctor probably can't answer it for you, but ask him, not me. So, if it makes you sleepy or gives you a dry mouth, question it. Another biggie is delirium with hospitalization. I suspect we all have known or known of one house called Aunt Martha, who lived alone, took care of herself, seemed very bright at age 84, until she broke her hip. Now, I won't get into the argument whether she broke her hip and fell, or whether she fell and broke her hip. That chicken and egg argument is irrelevant for this purpose. But she has to go in the hospital and have her hip pinned, and she gets an anesthetic, and she gets some sedation and pain medicine, and afterwards she doesn't know where she is or when it is or what's going on. And that improves over a matter of days to weeks. But no, Aunt Martha just never was herself again. And that is delirium triggering the cognitive loss. There are ways to avoid the delirium much of the time. They indicated that 40% of delirium with hospitalization can be prevented by reduced amounts of medication, by continual reminding of where you are, when it is, what's going on, not letting their mind get totally confused. Keep them focused on reality. And frequently you can prevent, especially if you hold down the painkiller and especially the sedative medications for a while. So that's the other real biggie in the medical category. And we can run down the list. I've mentioned the cardiovascular things. Just the surgery and hospitalization, general anesthetic, even without delirium, is adverse. I suspect that modern anesthesia will have less effect with that than the old traditional general anesthetics. A number of other chronic diseases that can contribute. Depression, it can be a matter of, is it depression or cognitive impairment? And the answer is frequently yes. Because either one looks like the other, and either one makes the other worse. So that one thing the approach you take is try to manage the depression and see if that doesn't help the cognitive decline. Untreated sleep apnea is another significant contributor to cognitive decline, and your heredity, of course, counts. Moving over to the next column of general approaches, and these are more in the, hey, what can we do now to keep it from getting worse, if not make it better? And there are a number of approaches, many of them advertised and marketed. And there's some things to keep in mind. One is that any good brain exercise, whether that is learning a new foreign language, is actually one of the really publicized, not commercially publicized, but learning a foreign language or a new musical instrument is considered to be one of the most brain stimulating activities. I guess my brain is either past being stimulated or something. Neither one of those are anywhere near my capabilities. But crossword puzzles, bridge games, any activity which causes you to think and analyze and try to remember whether you remember really well or not. Whether we can train our memory. Well, yes, we can train our memory. There are memory training procedures and games and classes that you can take, and they will give you a test before and a test after, and you will show that your memory is better after than it was before for doing what they trained you to do. But what they're training you to do isn't what you have to remember tomorrow to take care of whatever it is you need to take care of. And the problem with many of these brain games, if you like, is that they teach you to play that game or do that memory, and it does not generalize to normal activities well, as a rule. But anything that keeps your brain active is good and productive. The specialized brain training games like luminosity. Luminosity has shown more impact than studies by other than the marketers of luminosity.
What is included in luminosity?
Luminosity is a computer-based set of activities commercially available. You pay so much a month, I believe it is, to get access to it. You get on your computer every day, do a bunch of game-like activities that stimulate your brain. And it's fairly widely advertised and marketed, and it is a brain activity. I'm not saying that it doesn't stimulate your brain, but there's no reason to think that it stimulates your brain any more or better than other kinds of games, crossword puzzles, bridge games, working out a puzzle, trying to fix the car, whatever it is, something that makes you think and analyze.
Does it have to do something with light?
Light? No.
Luminosity?
No.
Oh,
No. It's supposedly illuminating in the cognitive sense rather than the light sense. There are some medications being developed and tested to improve cognitive functioning. I think the main thrust at the moment is the Department of Defense looking at them for military personnel rather than for seniors. I'm supposed to update something, but we'll forget about that. But there are ones that do, in fact, coffee does. There have been studies that show that you can learn better after having some coffee if you've got a brain that's prepared to learn. But it's not tremendous, and I don't recommend taking 6 or 8 cups of coffee to see if you can't do better at bridge this afternoon. But stimulants do have an effect, but I'm not recommending them. But they're transient. They wear off as the drug wears off. And that is true of most of the drugs being tested. There are some other bizarre things being tried, and there will be even more bizarre things tried, I'm sure, because I'm looking for the appropriate word for our category. They say seniors is bad and elders is bad, and whatever we are chronologically. Our population is growing. We're a big market, and there's going to be more commercially available things, and just question them as they appear on your TV every night. This is the sort of the summary list of what you can do to preserve what we can do to improve our cognitive function. Again, be physically active, take care of the cardiovascular risk factors, control your blood pressure, your blood sugar, smoking. I did intend to mention the other element of exercise. I talked about brisk walking, and you got to get breathing hard to get the endurance cardio exercise benefit. There is a benefit to lower level exercise. We had a talk here 6 months ago, Karen, on diabetes, and you're better working standing up than sitting down. Low level exercise helps level out the blood sugar. If you're just get up and walk a little bit, doing some activity regularly, if not continuously, makes the body use the blood sugar and keep the blood sugar more stabilized. Especially important for people who have diabetes or pre-diabetes or with a risk of diabetes. And it appears that much of the diabetic complications of things like our brain functioning and lots of other things are related to the peaks in blood sugar. And if we have a low-level activity, just standing up instead of sitting down works. Keeping some muscles active helps you use the blood sugar more steadily, and you stabilize the blood sugar and reduce the complications from blood sugar. But that's particularly for people with diabetes or prediabetes. You should keep track of, review your medications. Look at what medications you're taking, especially if they're in the dry mouth or drowsy category. Talk to your doctor about, hey, do I need this? Or is there something different that I might take that might be less likely to have an impact on my long-term brain functioning? Stay active. Keep learning, keep talking, keep reading challenging books, even watching challenging TV shows. And if you watch a TV show and are just entertained, that's better than just sitting doing nothing. But if you watch one that in fact makes you think and learn something, that's better. So that keep the brain working if we want to keep it working. Get as much sleep as you can. There are some of us who are sleep challenged. We like to lie in bed wide awake. But that's better than being up watching TV, I think. And if hospitalized or seriously ill or something like that, watch out for about taking an excessive medication, or have somebody keep reminding you who you are, where you are, what's going on. Keep you in the moment, so to speak. And as I say, evaluate products that are marketed to you on the television. So the summary is, cognitive aging is not dementia. That's the number one thing to learn today, if you didn't already know. Maintain a healthy lifestyle and active social life. Make sure your blood pressure and blood sugar are controlled. Get exercise, both physical and mental. And stay away from drugs that make you sleepy or give you a dry mouth. Now, in conclusion, I will just mention, and this we are not promoting it, I'm just making it available in case you may be interested. UCSD is doing a research study on the impact of behavioral interventions on cognitive outcomes. And they're looking for people who have mild, very mild cognitive impairment. People who are noticing the change in their brain function, be it memory or decision making. Not severe, but just some measurable bit. To volunteer, they will talk with you if you're interested. I've got a few flyers. You can pick up a phone number you can call and talk with the investigators and see if you're interested in participating. I think she said they give you $100 if you complete the whole, I don't know how many months it goes on or years, but they come to you. You don't have to go to them for the process. So I'll put these here if anybody wants one. And as I say, I'm not promoting it, but I did this presentation at the Continuing Education Center a few weeks ago. And there were several people interested in looking into that. So if you'd like to, you may. First question.
Do you happen to know on recent brain research that they've been doing, whether in analyzing the brain of someone who has manifested dementia or has manifested Alzheimer's or whatever, are they still finding the tangles and the bundles? Or, I mean, maybe the less frequent.
In Alzheimer's, to my this is not, I have minimal expertise in this area. I understand there are still plaques and tangles being found in Alzheimer's disease. But the problem is we can't really biopsy the brain. And in every other organ of the body, when it comes to trying to clearly define what's going on, we'd like to get a biopsy. Or, to my knowledge, they're not doing the real refined studies are specialized MRIs and PET scans, where they can in fact get a functional localization, but it doesn't get to the cellular level to see what's really going on cellular or chemical sense. Questions? Yes, Alice.
I didn't see mention the NSAIDs as a category was be favored or not.
Pardon?
The non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs.
Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, to my knowledge, haven't been specifically implicated in this. They have been implicated in kidney disease in some cases, and some of them in liver problems. But they're not the question is about non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. I'm blocking the names of all of them now. But
Advil.
Advil is the old original. If you're taking them on a regular basis, you want to make sure your doctor knows about it. I mean, many of them are available over the counter, and most of them, the over-the-counter preparation is no problem if you don't have kidney disease. But we're all at the age where almost anything that we take, our doctor ought to know about. Other questions? Well, thank you all for coming. And we'll give out to the back in case you couldn't remember a few points.